through this 20 years of studying these ancient mystical teachings, I was still confused about one thing. And that was, I thought I could make myself better and that there was something wrong with me. And if I could just figure out what was wrong with me, then I would enter into the golden light and forever be perfect, and that was the way that I was fundamentally effed up and broken. And I started to realize through Jungian depth psychology that actually it was the dark parts of me, the broken parts, the scared parts, and even the unhealthy, sick parts that were the portal into awakening and understanding that real enlightenment holds light and dark.
Welcome to the Brain Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Porter. Please join us on our mission to better a billion brains. Enjoy the episode and remember to share it with your family and friends.
Hello, Brain Tap Nation. This is Dr. Patrick Porter here with the Brain Fitness Podcast. We're here to teach you about different techniques, technologies, or things you might not know about that are actually affecting your world from the inside out, from the world of your consciousness to the world of your physiology. Today, we have a very special guest, someone I've known for quite a number of years. She's actually on the platform of Brain Tap. She is a relationship expert, but she goes way beyond that. And she has a new book out that I really am going to encourage you. By the end of this conversation, you're going to want to go and buy this book. We'll make sure that the links to that book are in the notes. It's called Glowworthy, where practices for awakening your inner light and loving yourself as you are, broken, beautiful, and sacred. And who I'm talking about is Katie Silcox, who's a New York Times bestselling author on the healthy, happy, sexy, which is always three good words people love to hear. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Katie, and tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book.
Yeah. So I always tell people when I talk about this book, the original title of the book was Holy. And we called it Glowworthy because that seemed to fit a little better later on down the line. But I called it that because it was really a personal journey that I'm still very much on, of realizing that, you and I are very similar, Dr. Porter, like long journey, long health journey, super scientific mind. Before I became an Ayurveda expert and teacher, I worked in artificial intelligence. I'm super interested in how human groups make decisions and how we can manipulate, how our brain is being manipulated. And I started to realize that after 20 years of doing tantric yoga and meditation, something was really missing. And what I found out is that, of course, the ancient teachings were saying this all along, but through this 20 years of studying these ancient mystical teachings, I was still confused about one thing. And that was, I thought I could make myself better and that there was something wrong with me. And if I could just figure out what was wrong with me, then I would enter into the golden light and forever be perfect, and that was the way that I was fundamentally effed up and broken. And I started to realize through lots of different things, but namely Jungian depth psychology, that actually it was the dark parts of me, the broken parts, the scared parts, and even the unhealthy, sick parts that were the portal into energy, that were the portal into awakening and understanding that real enlightenment holds light and dark. And so I wrote this book because my students kept asking me, is there a tantric book that you would recommend? And I was just like, well, that word is a little loaded. And so I wrote the tantra manual that I wanted and that I needed. And that's really what Glowworthy is about. It's about awakening to the light that you actually already are.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think that we're hearing this a lot within people. And we always say, reframe your past. In my first book, I have a chapter that I always get questioned on. Typically, if somebody's read it, it says, I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic. Because obviously, when I was going through that, I wasn't feeling blessed.
No.
But we have to take those parts of ourselves. It doesn't do me any service to say, poor me, but what can I learn from that? How can I take that and build my superpower? And for me, it was, as long as I'm working on myself, then I can work with others. So tell me a little bit about when you talk about, a lot of people feel broken.
Yeah.
What's a strategy or technique, or what do you learn about in Ayurvedic medicine that tells you, hey, how do we start working on our broken self?
We're broken.
Heal that part.
Well, one of the most interesting frameworks for understanding reality that I've discovered in Ayurveda is this idea of the koshas, which is a word that means layers. And so you and I grew up probably very similarly. A lot of listeners grew up where we're like, we understand we're a physical body. We understand we have a mental body because we're trained to be good thinkers. We're rewarded financially for it. We're all kind of super identified with our thinking brain. But we weren't trained to understand that we're anything else than thinking brain and physical body. And so what Ayurveda says is that you have another body that's called your pranamaya kosha, your energy body, which you're certainly aware of. And then you have other bodies. And one of your other bodies that's actually beyond the energy body is called your vijnanamaya kosha, which means your intuitive body. And then on the outside of that, the bliss body. And so I was super intrigued. And what the ancient teachings say is that the energy body, light, sound, and vibration, the energy body is the chariot that you ride to get to the soul. It's the gatekeeper between the physical reality and the reality of heart, the reality of soul, the reality of the timeless you that never dies. And I was like, wow. Why aren't we taught in school how to work with our energy? We're not, right? And so I began this 20-year quest to really understand the energy body in particular, with the deep understanding through the ancient teachings that is the pathway to access the intuitive body. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. What is the intuitive body? Because I think we hear that word and we're like, oh, trust your intuition. Well, what if you don't know the difference between your thinking, cognitive, limited beliefs, egoic mind and your deep intuition? And I make the joke, like, your intuition is rarely going to tell you to like date someone that's bad for you or buy another handbag if you have credit card debt. Your intuition is always right. Right? Your intuition is always right for you, and it's always going to work for the highest and best. And so I thought, wow, am I living from my deep intuition, or am I living from something else? And for me, the answer was a lot of time I'm living from the place of what the ancients called fear and seduction. You mentioned before that place in Buddhism, we call 10,000 joys and sorrows. So that made me excited to really work with energy and to study with some of the great masters. One of my teachers lives on Oahu as well. And to work with energy as a way of bypassing the thinking brain, which I don't think it's good for what it's good for, right? But it's not great on making soul level decisions. So that I'm going to swing back to what you asked me, which is the brokenness. And in Tantra, which is not about mind-blowing sex, although there's nothing wrong with that. I would love to have that as well. But Tantra the word Tantra means to become expanded out of limitations through everything available in this life, be it herbs. We talked about supplements. Brain Tap is a tantric product. It is enabling us to expand. And so anything that enables us to move out of limitations is expansion. And from that perspective, the way in which we feel broken and messed up, our traumas, our painful parents' history, whatever it is actually blocking a limitless reservoir of energy. So when we're able to interface, you mentioned in our podcast before, Laya Yoga, the word Laya in the tradition I studied means to dissolve. And so if we can interface with the brokenness with compassion and without actually wanting it to change, that's the secret, is we're not forcing the change on it. We're holding it in loving, compassionate presence. Ironically, being okay with it always being there and loving it a little bit, but not identifying with it, enables it to laya, to dissolve. And then that energy can come through. And so I think when I feel triggered, and I do get triggered all the time, when somebody pisses me off, when things don't go my way, and they don't go my way most of the time, especially when I feel really triggered, I'm like, oh, this is a really juicy opportunity to do that energetic work, to see what's behind there. And I'm sure you and I can talk more about what's behind there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, we were talking also about the different ways we get energy into our body. And a lot of people think the only way you get energy is to go get sugar or go get something to eat or go get some stimulating drink. Tell us a little bit about these energy bodies and other ways in which we talked about brain tap. We'll talk more about that at the end. But what are some ways that our listeners, when they think about, I mean, we even talked about, holy, like you were going to call this book Holy. So maybe you can tie that in, because I think what you said is very important, because it's almost like when you love that troublemaker part of you, it tames it. But it's like the subconscious is a fourth grader. It doesn't know how to think and act like everything else. And like you said, I like to tell people it's a great servant, but a terrible master. And so some people give away their power to it. So how do we empower ourselves with energy where we basically start acting or operating out of the soul level? And it's not about what's good or bad, but how do we do that for ourselves and really expand, like you're saying. I love the thought of the tantric, because I've never heard that before, that it's like this expanded self. And I think that's a pretty unique concept.
Anything that allows you to move beyond limitation. So you and I talked about brain tap. We talked about supplements. We could talk about relationships, sexuality, energy. But what the ancients say, and what I've been working on with a mentor for the past 5 years really closely, my mentor says, she with the biggest aura wins. And it doesn't mean you win like it's a competition, but it's like, who has the most light is the person in the room that's going to have the most effect on others. How do we get light? Brain tap is one of them, right? But there are other ways, and you can certainly do them in tandem. But one of my mentors is Rosalind Briere, and she used to say that the solution to pollution is dilution. And she was speaking about our energy. Most people do not know how to get grounded. And why I wanted to work with you, Dr. Porter, and why I found you impressive when we met each other at the Biohackers, years ago, was that you were doing embodied meditations, and you had us bring our energy down our body. And I was like, hallelujah, like someone that understands that meditation needs to be an active process where we are, as a human body, in relationship to our physiology, but also the earth below us. So how do we get grounded? We don't get grounded just by walking around on the ground. We get grounded by the intentional movement of our attention into the ground. And then once we have our physiology grounded, meaning we have the ability to track our focus down our physiology step by step, bit by bit, curious about what's blocked, curious about what's open, what feels numb, what feels open. We keep tracking that downward. It's like a light socket that you're plugging into the ground. That's the first part of getting energy. The second part is you actively enter into a relationship with the earth where now you pull it up. And this getting our energy down and then pulling it up is the basis of all energy practices in every traditional spiritual practice throughout the whole planet. Go down and then bring it up. And then you can get crazy and take it horizontally. And you talked about heart math and the resonance of the chakras, and they go in 360, but that's a little bit more advanced, right? If we could just help people get their energy moving down and then up, then they have a place to start. So a lot of the work that I talk about in Glowworthy is working with the basics of energy medicine, down and up. And then from there, you have access to, at the end of the day, the energy is the soul, right? The energy is the soul.
Right. So I know you talk a lot in the book also about presence. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are not present, right? Whether it be a conscious thing or unconscious thing. Tell us a little bit about how is a practice, is this what you're talking about here, is having this presence? Like I tell people, you're not the only thing alive in the room. Everything is vibrating, teeming with energy. Right. People, and everything's connected, right? They're in science, they can't run the same mouse maze. If one mouse runs through it successfully, all mice in the world know how to run that maze. So if mice are connected with this resonance, this information resonance, and how do we break out of the maze, in other words, or the matrix, however you want to think about it, and find our own presence? Because a lot of people are just like the fish that's following the tribe, and they don't know where they're going. And I know that's a key to expand itself, is to realize you're one, but you're also many. You're infinite and you're finite. and a lot of people, they start separating themselves too early, and then they pit themselves against other people. So what's your philosophy about
Absolutely.
that?
It's brilliant because, Buddha said we're not enlightened until all of us are. It's the same as the mice. And Atman equals Brahman. The soul of the individual at the end of the day equals divinity, Brahman. And it's not like, oh, I have an ego God complex. It's quite the contrary. One of the hallmarks of the way the ego works, and you know more about the brain science of this, but the ego, one of its hallmarks, one of the ways you're moving from your ego is separation. We feel different. We feel special. We feel superior than. We feel inferior to. And I do that as a practice. You and I like move in these circles where there's a lot of people who are really big and really important. And like one of my spiritual practices in those spaces, and everyone can do this at their job and social situations. It's like, just notice when the brain thought starts to go to I'm better than, or I'm worse than, because those are two sides of the same coin. And they're actually the opposite of reality. They're the opposite of truth. They are the opposite of science. And so that's one key practice is to awakening what we would call that bodhisattva chitta, like the mind of the awakened one, is to watch the way that you feel separate. The other hallmark of the ego is that it feels like things are always going to be this way. And that's why I love your work too, where it's like, no, you are limitless. The capacity for the mind to actually perceive possibility doesn't exist when we're in the place of the ego. The ego's job is to solidify itself into the past and to a future with no other options. And so that's how we know we're in what we call, the egoic consciousness and not soul. Soul is limitless, even if that means also not spiritually bypassing, right? Like you and I can both be expanded and aware that, if I eat donuts, I'm going to have consequences. And maybe you guys are going to work on this and change it. But at this moment, none of us are getting out of here alive. Like this, there is a finiteness to the physiology. And I think that being in that, what we would call darkness, or being in that scary place of our limitations, is the gold that actually enables us to open what I would call the heart. And the heart is actually the place of presence. I always say, one of my practices is just trying to get better at listening to people. People are starved. They want to talk so badly. You know this. People want to talk. They want so badly to be heard. And we can think about why that would be. And it's because they don't have a place usually to be heard. But we are so poor at being able to actually hear one another. That's presence. And if you can learn how to be present to yourself, it's a lot easier to be present with other people who can be annoying, who can be wonderful, and who can also be annoying, right? And so that the more I'm present with how annoying I am to myself, the more I can deal with everyone else.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, when I train therapists in my franchise, I used to tell them, God made it pretty simple: 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you talk, and people will give you the information. And I think you're right. People have not been heard. And so, we were trained by mom and dad who didn't go to parent university. So at some point we have to give up on that and retrain ourselves.
Yes.
So part of that training process is doing that. And you talk about a lot of people, because they think of love is this or that. They think they confuse love. Maybe they were abused as a child, and then now they think that's love, and they were abused by love, and so they don't find love again. So I know you talk about love, but what does the Vedas say about love, or the doctrine that you've learned, and how we enter into that? Because I know you talk about that also in your book.
I'm so glad you asked me that. And it's a big question and a brave question. And I say in the book, I don't intend to give a definitive answer, of course, but in Ayurveda, in Ayurvedic medicine, the heart chakra, love, the center place, right, is space. It's spaciousness. So when our lungs get mucus, lungs are a part of the heart chakra, we have disease. And when our heart gets heaviness, that's a disease, right? And so we can really tune to how much love we are actually holding and capable of right in this moment by feeling into both physically, sensations, and energetically and emotionally, what is the openness and freedom. And you can think about a vast blue sky, a weightless quality of space. That's the heart chakra. So in Ayurvedic medicine, one of the practices for having more love is to forgive anyone that you are still holding a grudge with. And that makes the heart heavy, right? Or working with the heaviness of sadness. And it's not like we have to get rid of these things. They'll always come and go. But an empty heart has room for all of these things to do what emotions should do, which is move. And so love is the willingness. Another of my favorite definitions is it's the willingness to be with what is without conditions. So if you think about your wife or your boyfriend or whatever, like the people that we love the most, are we perceiving them through the eyes of the unconditional? No, we're not. We are thinking about what we want them to do and what we want them to say and how we want them to show up. And essentially, to your point before, we are wanting them to give us the parenting that we didn't get. And from a brain perspective, that's a very immature developmental state of a child. That's one of the things I've really learned while writing this book is, what is love really, right? And what I thought I was doing as love was actually asking people unconsciously to reparent me. So I learned now how to parent myself and grow up. And now I feel like there's a lot more love in my heart and a lot more emptiness. And when you have that heart emptiness, ironically, the Vedas say you find that it's full.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, when you raise your energy like that and you're around people and you do find that judgment happening, when you have that empty heart and you realize there's enough space in this universe for us all. You know, it's not like Katie's doing her thing, then I can't do this thing. You're doing your thing because it's necessary. Everyone out there, I believe, has a unique skill or ability. So you talk about when you're finding your inner light, right, in the book. So give us some tips on what they can do, because a lot of people are out there. They have their purposelessness. Yeah. They don't have a purpose. They think their whole existence is get up, like the old show about make the donuts. You know, time to make the donuts. They do that, and then they come home. They stop by and get their 6-pack of beer. They sit in their recliner. They watch the news. They watch a few sitcoms. They're passed out. They get up. They rinse and repeat. Yeah. What is it? What spark? Because usually if the universe wants you to do something, they're going to make your life miserable till they get you to that movement. But what do you find if people want to accelerate it? You know, you don't have to have a breakdown to have a breakthrough. In other words, you can have a breakthrough without that. What have you found?
I just did an amen, hallelujah on that one, Dr. Porter. Please God, may we not have to only learn through breakdowns. Right. Although we usually do learn the most from those. Yeah. Well, I want to hold a lot of love for all our friends out there in the recliners with the beers and the donuts. And I told you in our podcast, when you were on my show, I love Judge Judy and I love to recline, you know, and so there are moments for that. But I understand you. The spark can be like, I think there's so many ways, but one of the ways we can go there is through an ancient tantric meditation called Smarana Shakti. Smarana means to remember, and Shakti is the power of. So the power of remembrance. What are we remembering? We can be sitting there with our beer and our recliner, but we can take a moment and remember a time in your life when you did feel loved, when you did feel like your life had meaning and purpose. And if you give people that exercise, what they'll often come back and say is, oh yeah, like I remember I was in the army and I was with my guys and we were fighting for a good cause. Like they'll have a memory of a time when they felt really connected. Oh, I was hiking and I came upon the sunrise or whatever it is. And you can use that to start to have the physiology, even have a memory of what it's like to not be in stagnation. So that's a great practice, Smarana Shakti. The other thing is prayer, visualization, petition, propitiation. So what does that mean? It means, like you, I have my morning practice. I got a new puppy, so it's kind of messed up my life a little bit, but she's getting older. My teacher used to say, if you want to really know what love is, get married, have a baby, and get a puppy, and so you're just really having to do hardcore tantric practice. But my practice is to pray and to really ask guides, spirit, to be with me. Tell me how, I wrote a book, love the book. I hate to travel. Right. But I said, look, if I'm meant to travel for this book, I'll do it. What am I meant to do to serve the planet? What am I meant to show me, teach me, give me a vision of what I'm meant to do to serve. Right. And those opportunities will start to come. Spirit will tell you, the synchronicities will happen. And when I'm serving, I'm in the spark. And I think I include myself in this, we can get so caught in our own needs and wants and desires that if we actually start to serve other people, spark is going to be in abundance.
Right. No, that's awesome. Now, one of the things that I've noticed just counseling people for 30 years, I'm not in practice anymore. I just do the brain tap. But when I was, people would come, and as soon as one person starts to grow and develop, the other one doesn't. It seems like, a lot of the people would be getting separated. They're not together. And the old saying that you shouldn't look into each other's eyes, but look in the direction. If you're both moving in the same direction, if people are growing apart, what do you find? I mean, because a lot of people think, I was brought up Catholic, so obviously you're supposed to stay married your whole life. But I got divorced after a year with my first wife. Now I've been married for 33 years now. But I'm one of those guys, I like to fail fast and get over it, so, but what would you say to somebody? Because a lot of people, they might feel that growth, and then your whole world's going to change, right? So tell us a little bit about how that happens and what your practice tells you about that.
You mean in terms of couples?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what happens when you are growing and expanding and your partner may not be going at the same rate? Or, yeah. I mean, I'm the word. I'm like a weirdo that's been able to do armchair psychology. I'm not married, right? And one of the definitions of the yogini is that she who sits on the outskirts of culture, she who's in the forest on the outside of town, so she can come to the town and give information. I feel like that's kind of been my role thus far, and oftentimes the wise old women of the community wouldn't be married. They wouldn't be right in these like monks and nuns. And so I want to just say, first and foremost, I'm not married. And so I'm probably the worst person to ask this question. But what I can say is because of that advantage point, I've been able to observe and to kind of build up the teachings around it. It's really hard to see water when you're swimming inside of it. And from my observation, my own experience as well, it's okay if you aren't growing at the same rate as your partner. If you have love and respect, that's all that really matters. And I say that to a lot of my students who join our program, and they're like, oh my God, this is changing my life. You've seen it, I'm sure too, where people are growing in leaps and bounds. They're having their mind expanded, their energy's changing, and their partner's just not that into it. What do we do? Right. And I think they don't have to be on the same journey as long as they're supportive of your journey. I think there's this false idea that we're all going to be on this tantric path together, when in fact, in ancient tantric practices, your teacher when you got to a certain advanced level of tantric practice, your teacher would then tell you to get married. And then he would say, and you have to stay in the same hut with them. And I don't want you to be more than 20 feet away from each other at any point in time, because the marriage was the exact thing you needed to reveal to you all of the parts of you that were being projected onto them. So you could go the tantric route and say, okay, all this stuff I don't like about my partner is actually projection. I can use that to look at my own inner demons, or sometimes it's not the right fit. And I think, like, I grew up Southern Baptist, you don't get divorced, right? And I think this is a real travesty of our society, where the expectation that you would be growing with the same and evolving with the same person for an entire lifetime, we're beginning to see that may or may not have some validity. I mean, I can go either way with it. You can go right-handed or left-handed on that one.
Right. Yeah. So when we're thinking about just giving somebody who's never heard of this practice before, because I'm sure with Brain Tap Nation, we're going to be hitting a lot of people. Some people are they're probably wondering, well, what is Dr. Porter doing about this stuff, or whatever. But everything we do is steeped in ancient tradition.
Everything.
So when you see how you translate this in ancient traditions, like you're saying, they might not even get married till they get to this certain point. But people here are already experiencing it. What if a lot of people are actually, some of their wounds come from their spiritual practice or what they perceived as their spiritual practice? What do you recommend for them?
I have a lot of compassion for that. And I understand that, my teacher says that when we're coming with a lot of trauma and it's unprocessed and unpacked, we can actually be attracted to spiritual teachers or teachings that might be reinforcing the very traumas or karmas, as we would call them, that we are attempting to liberate ourselves from. And so I think it's really important to take spiritual sovereignty as number one. I think you and I agree on this, and that the only guru that I'm interested in is the one that we can access through our own heart, through our own practice. And so a real teacher is someone who's actually teaching you from a place of deep respect and compassion with zero attachment to you. Zero. Your teacher shouldn't have any attachment to you. And but you will typically be attached to your teacher, and that can be quite healthy, right? But we should actually be empowering students through these practices to become more self-sufficient and less reliant.
That's awesome. So what do you see out there? Because I know I see you at the biohacking, you're hanging out with, everybody who's there. We put together a biohacking bundle, where you're part of that as well. What do you see as the conversation out there? Because it looks to me, and I've been in this field for a long time, that science is becoming more spiritual and spirituality is becoming more science-based. Where do you see it going? Because, you're hanging out with people that might not have any spiritual bent, but once you start telling them, they start lighting up. What do you think that's happening there?
Well, we humans are funny, and we like to separate things. And we talk about the mind-body connection. We talk about science and heart and spirituality as if they're these separate boxes. We created the boxes. And I'm hanging out with the biohackers. I used to teach at the Yoga Journal conferences, and now I'm hanging out with the biohackers, and I wonder why as well. But it's because I think, I taught a workshop at the Dave Asprey's last conference called Ayurveda is the original biohack. I think these biohacker guys and gals are reincarnated yogis, and that we're using the technology to try to upgrade the physiology during a particular time that the ancients predicted, called the Kali Yuga, which means the age of chaos and banana sandwich. Like, it is so hard not to have a toxic body, that we are swimming in it, right? And so I see you guys as the ancient yogis reincarnated. I don't care if people don't have a spiritual practice, but if you keep using these technologies and biohacks, eventually you'll probably get there, because the different layers of your consciousness start to open. It's just an end result of going deeper and deeper and deeper into, if you go deep enough into science, you're going to have a spiritual epiphany, as Einstein said, right? And similarly, if you keep going into spirituality, I had my background is in artificial intelligence, but I thought, man, this is so whack. It's not the whole story. If I keep going far enough into spirituality, I'll find the best of science. I think currently the reason I'm interested in hanging out with a lot of scientists is our communities speak that language. If I come and I start talking about dolphins and rainbows and gummy drops, like, people can't hear me. We have to learn one another's language. And we have a year-long program called Ayurveda School, and we have a ton of doctors. We have a ton of nurses. We have a ton of vets, right, who have gone down the army route, and now they're looking for their femininity, and so, and what we hear from doctors and nurses in our program is, oh my God, every hospital in America needs ancient Ayurveda. And I say to them, yes, and Ayurveda needs modern science. We need one another. On that note, I just really want to say, I take supplements. I use brain tap. I do infrared sauna. I am all about the Vitamix, and I used to get letters from these like traditional Ayurveda fundamentalists who'd be like, oh, you're ruining Ayurveda because you're talking about the Vitamix. And I'm like, wait a minute. I am the reincarnation of thousands of years of humanity. And let me tell you, if you would have popped out a Vitamix into ancient India 3,000 years ago, they would have used it. Yeah. I just think we're continually evolving this. And one more thing on that note, the ancient Traka Samhita, written, one of the earliest human texts ever known, says these teachings must be adapted for the time and the place and the people in which they are being presented. If they aren't adapted, they will not be understood and they will be poisonous. So I think we have a duty to do what our ancient Indian foremothers and forefathers, and not just India, all of our ancestral lines have traditional wisdom, shamanic wisdom. We've got to update it and make it relevant for, Jenny sitting in her house in West Virginia or whoever, right? And that's my mission.
No, that's right in line with my mission. That's what I think. I tell people ancient traditions, modern technology. We have to bring it up to date. And when I travel India, it's really great because I got to speak in front of 75,000 people there at one event. And wow. I was talking about meditation. And, to go to India and talk about meditation, right? But what I showed them was I was able to, it was a heartfelt meditation in the Guru Daji. We were measuring the people actually sending the energy to the other people. And what we found was the people sending the energy got better results than the people receiving it. So my point to him was when we do those practices, even though the more you give away, the more you get. And as soon as the world realizes that, and when we were able to measure it, that's when Daji said, you got to come and speak in front of our big congregation and show them the science. And so Dr. Vivek Sharma and I got a chance to speak. It was pretty impactful. And then now with what's going on with AIMS Bhopal, they're showing the same thing. They're very interested in, because they used to have a Ayurvedic hospital in Bhopal and their allopathic hospital. They were separate. They're on the same campus. And now what they're doing is they're doing both things now. So I said, why would you separate them? I mean, and it's just because that's the way it used to be. If you were doing this, you were doing this, but you can have the best of both worlds. I believe that is very true. So where do you see all this going? We're talking about, because we're focusing, all of this goes into building a better brain, really, because in order to do all these things, if even Maslow's, his hierarchy of needs, if you're out there in survivor mode, you can't do any of these things. So we got to get our brain working right. And that's why we encouraged you to create a series for us in relationships, because I believe a lot of our stress comes from unhealed relationships, right? And people not knowing what to do and becoming too stressed about it. So tell us a little bit about, hopefully we're going to get some more sessions from you on different topics, but tell us a little bit about the series you have in Brain Tap. So those listening go, hey, I really love what Katie's saying. Where can I learn more? Obviously they can buy your book, which we'll have there. We're going to put your Instagram and followings, all the social media, but tell us a little bit, those brain tappers that have the app can go listen to you right now. So tell them a little bit about what they could experience.
So I have to tell you, I really do want to come back and do more for Brain Tap, because I've been doing my own meditations on Brain Tap, which is really weird. And I've never done that before. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not like trying to blow my own horn, but they're really good. And they're so sweet. And the central focus of my Brain Tap meditations is learning how to have a deep relationship to your own body, to your own energy, to your own heart. And then the way that enables us to actually be in relationship with anyone else. The whole thing is you to you. My teacher says you to you, then you to the divine, and then you to everyone else. And if we get that, we got to have a connection to ourselves. And when we are in presence with our own self, that becomes the portal through which we receive divine guidance. My teacher in India used to say, you have to take the first step, but the divine will take 1,000 towards you. You have to take the first one though. And that's, free will. And so, the brain tap meditations are really special. You and I actually worked on them together to create the music and the binaural beats and the frequencies, which is your area of expertise. And I actually got a couple text messages after the biohacking events from big, strong, powerful men in suits. And they were like, I started crying when I was doing your heart meditation. That was like really sweet feedback to hear these guys getting in touch with their softness and their masculinity, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. I think people misunderstand spirituality. Arjuna was a warrior too. So, I mean, they just don't know. So where do you think this is all going? Where do you see the future of what you're doing and in the world and the layouts? If we could teleport to 5 years, 10 years in the future, what's Katie going to be up to?
Oh, I'm very clear where I'll be. I don't know where everyone else will be, but I made a commitment 3 years ago. I did a vow, and that was I am committed for the rest of my life to being totally dedicated to the removal of unnecessary fear in my body and my heart and my mind. Unnecessary fear. Some fear is necessary. And I took that vow, and that's where I'm going. I think we live in a time of unprecedented pain and suffering. But if you read history, we humans have been suffering for thousands of years. And I think there will be pain and suffering in the future, of course. And Ayurveda says that the best thing one can do is to build one's resilience. So that's just what I'm trying to do.
Excellent. That's actually the topic of some of my talks I'm doing this year is mindset is there's more to resilience than mindset. So, that's part of it. And I think it's important because right now people don't realize you're going to have setbacks. You're going to have failures. These are all learned things that we do. And that we are designed to learn through stress. They actually, one of the other experiments that I thought was very interesting is they gave mice everything they needed. They didn't have to move. They could go to the bathroom, eat whatever they wanted. No, they died. They didn't last. And, even mice need a purpose. Yeah. We need a purpose. We need a reason for being. We need and I think part of our reason to be is to find out what we're supposed to be sharing with the world. Just like a photon that is shared through the body through photobiomodulation. Once your energy is full, it has to share with the cell next to it. The same is true with you as an individual. We have a community. If we build up our energy, we pass that on to other people, and it happens unconsciously. So I want to thank you for being part of one of our first season of doing the Brain Fitness podcast. We hope to have you back because I know you have a lot more to share. And I know that people are going to want to learn about it. Go get the Glow book, go follow you, get your first book as well. Everybody wants to have those happy, healthy experiences that you talk about. And I think you've got a lot to learn and share. But what have I forgot to ask you that you feel like the audience needs to hear from you or that we've neglected to talk about? Is there anything, or just reinforce a key concept?
Well, I want to say thank you so much. I love being a part of your community. And there's nothing that you forgot. I think a great way of closing is just for all of us to remember the Vedas, what I've studied, what you've studied, our ancient foremothers and forefathers. The reason I'm so passionate about the Vedas is it's one of the oldest written religious spiritual texts on the planet. It's been conserved and preserved, and 5,000 years is a long time to get it right and to keep wanting to lean into it. And they say in this text, silence cures all. And I think that would be a great place to end. Awesome. I love it. Be still and know God. That's what they say even in the Bible. So it's right. Very good advice. Excellent. And I want to thank you for being part of this. I look forward to seeing you at the biohacking conference here in a little bit. And so those of you listening, please tune in next week. Please share, get this out to everyone you know. We live in an energy economy. Right now, if we can raise our energy, we're going to have higher vibrational thoughts, activities. Our brain's going to function better. We're going to have more love in the world because remember, we want to be with gainers, not drainers. And so I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Porter, bringing to you the world's greatest minds to help you to better your brain on a way to bettering a billion brains. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on our mission to better a billion brains. Follow at Dr. Patrick Porter on social media for updates, and remember to practice brain fitness every day.